morning. Morning, Friday by day. Capital Preservation Friday. That's what we got on the docket today. We're streaming here on YouTube as we do most Fridays. And I hope everyone's doing well. Morning around Marco. Brian, how you guys doing? There's some news to cover here today before things start off. We've got some news out of the BOJ, the Bank of Japan. The pace of interest rate cuts has been the focus for much of the world, but in Japan, things are going in the opposite direction. So the BOJ just hiked its key policy rate to its highest level in nearly 20 years, about 17 years, right? Continuing its hawkish stance after exiting an era of unconventional policy. It's important to note that rates in Japan are still comparatively low, in the range around 0.5%, but there are plans to keep pushing up the borrowing cost towards levels seen in other major economies. Japan has been mired in decades for weak prices and economic stagnation, even as inflation impacted the globe in the aftermarket of the COVID pandemic. BOJ policymakers largely viewed local price pressures as imported from elsewhere. That changed in 2024 as a solid wage growth looked more permanent, and the central bank became more confident in a virtuous economic cycle that would stimulate compensation and keep inflation stable. Even after exiting the NIRP, the NIRP, and massive monetary stimulus, the BOJ still feels that the NIRP, negative interest rates, that it is a ways away from the neutral rate, or at a level that is neither cooling nor overheating the economy. The latest developments come as President Trump made an aggressive push towards a new global era for cheap money. Wide-ranging tariffs are also a concern for trading partners of the U.S., including Japan, which could threaten growth prices and currency. The yen, right, USD JPY, has already experienced rapid weakening in recent years, even topping 160 yen level versus the dollar. That is seen as requiring intervention. So short-term risks are significant considering issues such as the weak yen with appreciation, pressure, and shaky politics. But Japan presents significant opportunities amidst normalization and corporate reform in the long run. Equities are relatively cheap compared with global peers, but not exceptionally. Moving into 2025, structural themes such as reforms and normalization pathways will be on watch for global investors. There's a lot of opportunity in Japan. I think that people have looked at it as a place to park some money and look for some gains overall. And today we have a decent amount of news that's set to hit the wire. We've got the the PMI Composite Flash Index, which comes out 9:45. Existing home sales at 10. Consumer sentiment at 10. I believe there was something else as well, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see here. We have consumer sentiment, inflation, UO Michigan consumer sentiment, and UO Michigan inflation expectations. So we have three data events that come out at 10 a.m. Eastern time, which is pretty heavy in terms of the news that's expected. So might be kind of light trading going into about 10 a.m. Eastern time, and then we'll see kind of how things change up. But the way I see it is currently equities are setting up for a strong move to the upside, very close to all-time highs. NASDAQ and big tech is a little more, it's lagging a little in a sense, right? A touch lagging, but the S&P has accepted auctions higher. We'll discuss this in just a bit, but let's take a look at Constellation Software. Let's take a look at some of these equities, right? NVIDIA yesterday, from a gap lower, closed towards the prior day highs, trying to gap up a little here. Now, Apple is trying to fill its gap after a monstrous downside move. Microsoft is holding out well. Amazon's doing a lot better with Meta opening up some of that upside. Google's a little stagnant here, and so is Tesla, but the majority of these tech names are starting to catch a bid. Once Apple starts turning over and actually accepting more aggression to the upside, I think that things get a little more stable for the upside in big tech. Right now, the NASDAQ did make a move up from yesterday. It was holding that key area that we had talked about. I was in a trade for 7 trillion hours, it seems. It worked out finally, but it was a long morning. I didn't do anything except hold that NASDAQ long. And now we're coming into some important areas for both the S&P and the NASDAQ. So let's dive into that quickly here. We'll look at these equities, and then we'll put on Mr. Bucks for some oil commentary. But let's start off with the S&P 500, the futures here. And this is my plan for the day. Right now, we've accepted into this auction higher, right? So we've moved up into a higher band distribution auction. And so far, we're trying to hold the lows. I thought maybe we could trade into those higher 30s, so 61, like 37, let's say. But overnight, we're holding the 40. It's cleaned up this like kind of little baby low volume auction from yesterday's move. Heaviness of volume completes all of these poor highs that were left behind from weeks before. So as long as we're holding above this like 37, in my opinion, there is momentum to the upside, so we can go and see and tag these areas higher, right? Where we're looking at 55, we're looking at 60, and potentially a move towards those all-time highs. We're not very far from all-time highs. The all-time high, I believe, was like 61, like 83 or something along those areas. The SPX made an all-time high. The SPY made an all-time high. Options are doing fantastic, so things are going well here for the bull side. But this 61.37 is a pivot for today, because if we start dumping lower, what had happened into yesterday and the day before that was a lot of selling that was trying to come into those high 30s. So the fact that we're above those areas, right, holds out that these guys were pretty trapped. A lot of buying also ensued at that area. We had a huge buy press that happened at 61.30 yesterday that held higher lows. But overall, if we lose that like higher 30, we start dumping into prices much lower. I think that we accept into an auction lower and the sell side opens up. I don't necessarily think that happens. I think it is a Friday buy day, but obviously we have to stay vigilant with that and see if we can just start moving higher, right? We need to start breaking those 50s. We have to start breaking those 60s and get that expansion to the upside momentum move, as long as these like mid 30s hold. So that's generally what I'm looking at. You also can see it from a delta perspective. Right, we stacked up a lot of end of day selling yesterday, but more importantly, we're stacking a lot of people that are trapped into this 40 area, just above the region that I'm a little more interested in. So like a few points, give or take, it's not the end of the world. But right now, we're trying to hold some of that bid. NASDAQ, on the other hand, is a bit weaker in the grand scheme of things, because yesterday we did hold the auction low very well. It took ages, literally hours, which was a little annoying, but that's life. NASDAQ right now is fighting with this auction top around 22,050. So that area, I'd want to see a bid through that to really help us open up that upside. So far, yesterday's balance top, right, is holding very well, 980 on the overnight. We held the bottom of this auction around 880 yesterday, right, pretty well, and we moved up, okay, but realistically, I don't want to see the failures here, right? This is where NASDAQ kind of shows its weakness in comparison to the SPUs, because we're still within this balance. SPUs above the balance. I want to see NASDAQ open up the bit above that balance, and like then the 22,120 area is of interest, like that 100, 120. You start bidding above this 50, you got a nice like 50, 60 point move before you start getting a little concerned. Then moves above that, I think it's an easy fill, hundreds of points higher. So I'd really would not want to see NASDAQ fail 0.50. I'd want to see that expansion move above that, and then we'll kind of locate the potential for the buy side. Because you start losing 980 area, you start moving towards the bottom of this balance, which could theoretically hold, but I think some sell side does try to open up from there, as we're still within this balance. You can see right now NASDAQ's failing again for the trillionth time. It's not like a complete failure, but it's not like the sexiest of movement in my opinion. Right now we have this B-shaped ledge at 49 on the SPUs as well. So the initial move, ideally just burst through auctions higher for the buy side continuation, but you know, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing some kind of a pullback to see if we can get long and open that upside up, right? Like I have that pivotal area mainly on the SPUs. If the SPUs start dumping under like 35 area, 61.35, like at that point I start getting pretty concerned about the potential of these buyers until we see much lower prices. So let's see. Let's put on Stefan. Yeah, we're gonna stop this screen share for now.
Good morning, Victoria.
Morning, Mr. Bucks. How you doing?
Doing all right. What are you up to today?
Yeah, Not much. I didn't trade on the overnight. This is the first this week, I think. So we're getting prepared for today's potential move, and ideally better than what we saw the last few days off the open. The first like hour or so didn't do anything. So what a
Got some sleep.
yeah, first time ever, right? What do we got for oily today?
Alright, so good morning Victoria, good morning TRADEPRO Academy. Oil market is down to sideways, basically. We opened less than $1 lower than we opened yesterday. Yesterday was a down day, and that was continued initially in the Globex. When a Globex low of 74.01, like 8 o'clock last night. And then since then, we've just kind of been grinding upwards. We've made it back above the pivot, which is at 74.81. We haven't made it to R1 yet, which is at 75.47. We are trending upwards. And so just kind of a lazy, flat line kind of grind sort of way. So we'll scout along and see if this market wants to continue to push it up, and if it does, we'll be on board. Victoria, back to you.
Perfect. Let's populate this screen. Yeah, so like I was saying before, we got some time here, but I am trying to lean a little more bullish. Let's see here, open up, I'll type these out in Discord and see what's going on. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Is my NQ chart set to a range, and if so, what range? I use a 12-point range on the NASDAQ. Well, not responding. I use a 12-point range on the NASDAQ chart for my range chart. Yeah. Or do I? Yeah, it's a 12-point. Point on the range as well as the range for the footprint. Brian, Brian has this. I was telling you guys about this before. Brian has this like order flow audio thing, which has like different frequencies, I guess, in terms of like loudness and I guess pitch of the voice of like buying and selling. We looked at it once in the Discord voice and it was crazy. It was just screaming at me. But it's interesting because it starts to get more aggressive as like the voice like deepens and like slows down, I think. And like sometimes there's shrieks. It does get me freaked out. It's like buy, 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 buy. It's like buy, 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 buy. And I don't really know what's going on, but GM everyone joining us on stream. Jimmy. Saj, what the fuck? Saj, you haven't slept? Why? One second, I'll be back. Yeah, go get some. There was even that much movement on the overnight. Like, I woke up slightly. I can't remember at what time, but like, I don't know. Maybe it was like 1 a.m. my time or like 3 a.m. my time. I can't remember. But I woke up for a bit, just opened my phone to see what futures were doing. Nothing, like barely moved. I was like, all right, this is time for me to sleep. I had the idea yesterday of in that I posted in the journal. Just an idea. I didn't act on it, nor was I looking to act on it too much. But I thought that like 55 on the SPOOs and like 0.50 on the Nasdaq might sell off a little more to get better buyers at lower prices. It was good. I just didn't do anything about it. You bought 990 fair. It's a good trade. Yeah, we have to have always someone working the overnight shift here. I'd like to get, like, if I'm looking at this, like, realistically, I feel like I don't even know if this area would trade on the SPOOs because like there's a bunch of negative delta down here, but like I'd kind of like to get active here on the Nasdaq. Like this is a good area. Maybe head fakes lower. It's like a midpoint in the distribution area. I'd like these guys to break this top and then start getting a little more active above that area. And then we have about 7 minutes till the market opens. TPA graveyard shift has to constantly be navigated by someone. Do I think price action was a little odd yesterday, meaning that there was some good delta sell levels, but the downside never came in? I think realistically with Nasdaq, there was a huge buyer that came in on the overnight session just before the market opened at pre-market. It was like It's a big buyer down at like 870 or something, or 880. That's like kind of what triggered my longs. I think like it was just like selling that was getting absorbed and stuck. It was just like passive buying, aggressive selling, getting trapped into the lows. So like I had confidence. I like the idea. That's why you guys saw me sit through like I think 7 hours of long side, even though it came back to my entry below my entry, like blah blah blah, like whipsawing. It looked good because they just kept getting trapped into the lows. So it was weird. It was like very choppy, and then we got this like expansion higher into the afternoon, which I thought the expansion higher would come quicker than that. But overall, like all of that selling into the low, I think that builds up a good qualification to hold out that long and like get long. But weird a little, yeah. So Haj, you just gotta put the entry in and then just go to sleep. That's how I trade the overnight. I feel like we're starting to get a little too obsessive with this ETH session. We're putting in these like graveyard shifts that are like 15 hours of screen time. Yeah, that anxiety is gonna move away. Yeah, yesterday I thought Spoos would pull back to like 6105 area 10. Like it kind of held out, started moving above the 20. Pretty strong on the buy side from there. S&P was a lot stronger yesterday as well throughout the morning session, so I had a little more confidence in the Nas. That 75-hour long Nas trade. Ало, видях, че ми звъня преди час някъде. Да, той сега работа. Бачка, къде? Не знам, той нали Вучо има рожден на неделята, вие ако нещо правите. Да бе. Къде са излезнали? Така ли? Добре. Да, за вечера, да. Не много, сигурно нещо сутринта или събота, утре, да. До вечера ли? Да. Не знам, ще ви, може и да мина. Не знам, защото аз до вечера сигурно ще работя малко по-докъсно. Да. Ага. Ага.